Recently, there has been some controversy on the online leftist community concerning the status of the Soviet Union. Was it, or was it not, socialist? Here I hope to clear up some misconceptions. A minor note though, this applies for the period up to right before Khrushchev's reforms. After those reforms, a separate analysis can be found in another series of videos I've made on my channel. So let's get started. Under the socialist system of national economy in the USSR, the means of production are social property. That is, they belong to the working people in the form of either the socialist state or of the collective farms and other cooperative unions. Consequently, the products of labor also belong to the working people. Under the capitalist economic system in other countries, the means of production are the private property of the capitalists and landowners, and consequently the products of labor also belong to those capitalists and landowners. The socialist system of national economy of the USSR meant that the exploitation of man by man had been abolished, that wage labor had been abolished, and that the purpose of production is the maximum satisfaction of the growing material and cultural needs of the whole of society. Labor power was not a commodity, there was no right to hire and fire, and workers were paid according to the quality and quantity of their work. Capitalist production, on the other hand, is for the purpose of securing the maximum capitalist profit through the exploitation, ruin, and enslavement of the working people. The existence of wage labor in the USSR has yet to be proven by those who claim the USSR is not socialist. In the USSR, socialist production developed in a planned way and without interruption. The steady rise in the living standards and purchasing power of the working people are a stimulus to increased production and a secure guarantee of freedom from crises and overproduction and unemployment. Capitalist production, on the other hand, develops without a plan. The growth of production runs up against the proletarian condition of the working people and the relative reduction of their purchasing power. This inevitably brings crises of overproduction, growing unemployment, and impoverishment of the masses. In the USSR, each worker received material wealth according to the quantity and quality of his or her labor. The distribution of the national income serves to raise the welfare of the working people, extend socialist production in town and country, and increase the social wealth. Under capitalism, on the other hand, distribution of the national income takes place for the purpose of enriching the exploiting classes and their numerous parasitic servants. In the USSR, state power belonged to the working class. Under the capitalist economic system, on the other hand, state power belongs to the capitalists, who use this power to maintain a state of affairs which is satisfactory and advantageous to the propertied classes, while the proletariat and the working masses of the peasantry, in the case of the Soviet Union, are exploited classes, compelled to work for the capitalists and landowners. In the first phase of communism, lower stage communism known as socialism, social or socialist property exists in two forms: state property and cooperative and collective farm property. State socialist property is the property of the whole of the Soviet people, vested in the socialist state of workers and peasants. Cooperatives and collective farm socialist property is the property of individual collective farms and cooperative unions. To the two forms of socialist property, there correspond two forms of socialist economy. Number one is state enterprises, or state enterprise, meaning factories, mills, state farms, the machine and tractor stations, etc. And number two, cooperative, collective economy, collective farms and consumer cooperatives, etc. State socialist property differs fundamentally from state capitalist property. When one enterprise or another, or even a whole branch of the economy, becomes the property of the bourgeois state, its social nature is unaltered. The modern bourgeois state represents the interests of monopoly capital and is an instrument of coercion in its hands, with which it protects the oppression of the working majority by the propertied minority. Accordingly, state capitalist enterprises too are based on the exploitation of the working people and stand opposed to the people as an alien and oppressive force. In socialist society, power is in the hands of the working class, headed by the working class. They own the means of production. The labor power used in socialist enterprises is not a commodity, since the working people who own the means of production cannot sell their labor power to themselves. Accordingly, every possibility of the exploitation of man by man is ruled out in socialist enterprises. By their very nature, socialist relations of production differ fundamentally from the production relations of capitalism and of other social systems based on private ownership of the means of production. Socialist relations of production are characterized by 1. Complete predominance of social ownership of the means of production, existing in two forms, state ownership and cooperative collective farm ownership. Number 2, emancipation of the working people from exploitation and the establishment of cooperation and socialist mutual aid. Number 3, distribution of the products of labor in the interests of the working people according to the principle to each according to his labor. The predominance of social ownership of the means of production gives rise to also a quite different kind of distribution in a socialist society from that existing under capitalism. Because exploiting classes and the exploitation of man by man do not exist in socialist society, there is no division of labor into necessary and surplus labor, and equally no division of the product into necessary and surplus product. Socialist relations of production give rise to an objective necessity for a quite different division of labor and its product from that obtained under capitalism. Under socialism, the means of production are socially owned, and production itself is for the satisfaction of the needs of society as a whole and of each of its members. Consequently, the labor of the producers is divided into the following two parts: work for oneself and work for society. Accordingly, the product of labor also, excluding the part used to replace expended means of production, is divided into two parts: the product for oneself and the product for society. Work for oneself provides the product which is distributed between the producers in accordance with the quantity and quality of their work, and covers the personal needs of the worker and his or her family. Work for society provides the product which is used for social needs: expansion of production, development of education, health services, provision for defense, etc. In socialist society, where the working people are themselves in power, work for society is as necessary to them as is work for oneself. The product for society, which is used to expand socialist production, augments the material prerequisites of a further improvement in the welfare of the working people. The product for society, which is expended on education, health services, social welfare, and other material requirements of the whole people, also serves to satisfy the needs of the working people in the same way as the product for oneself does. Social ownership of the means of production and of the products of labor, together with the distribution of products in the interests of the working people, account for the decisive superiority of the socialist over the capitalist economic system. All the advantages of large-scale social production, which ensures an enormous growth in the productive capacity of labor, are given to society as a whole and to the working masses, and not, as under capitalism, to the exploiters. The predominance of social ownership of the means of production means that socialist production is freed from contradiction inherent in capitalism between the social character of production and the private capitalist form of appropriating its fruits. In socialist society, socialist property in the means of production is in conformity with the social character of production. Accordingly, the relations of production in socialist society fully correspond to the productive forces. Since commodity production continues to exist under socialism, the law of value and the categories associated with it operate in socialist economy. Let's keep in mind that Marx did say socialism will be stamped with the birthmarks of capitalism, that being commodity production and the law of value. The new economic conditions created by the victory of socialism, on the other hand, alter the character of the commodity production and commodity circulation, restricting their sphere of operation. In socialist economy, commodity production and commodity circulation exist without capitalists and serve the socialist economy. The sphere of operation of the law of value is strictly limited. Commodity production is made necessary in socialist society by the existence of two basic forms of socialist production: state and collective farm. In state enterprises, both means of production and output are public property. In collective farms, the means of production, such as drought and productive livestock, agricultural implements, farm buildings, seeds, etc., and the output produced are group or cooperative collective farm property. The basic and decisive means of production in agriculture, land, and the machine and tractor stations are state property. Since the output of state enterprises belongs to the socialist state, and collective farm output belongs to the collective farms, exchange of goods through purchase and sale is the necessary form of economic connection between industry and agriculture. Here, as in all purchases and sales, the seller loses his right of ownership to the commodity, and the purchaser becomes its owner. Lenin pointed out that the economic essence of socialism is exchange of the products of large-scale socialized industry for peasant products, and that commodity exchange is a check on the correctness of the relationship between industry and agriculture, the working class and peasantry. Lenin's statements remain true for the whole first phase of communism. The Soviet state acquired food for the urban population and raw material for industry, mainly from collective farms and their members through regular commodity exchange, through compulsory purchase at fixed price and voluntary purchase by contract at higher prices. Collective farms and their members in their turn can obtain the money they need to acquire the output of industry only by selling their own marketable output to the state, to cooperatives, and on the collective farm market. Thus, agricultural produce and raw materials acquired from the collective farm sector by the state and the cooperatives by compulsory purchase or by contract are commodities, and so are agricultural products sold by collective farms and their members in collective farm markets. Industrial products, mostly consumer goods, produced by state enterprises and purchased by collective farms and their members are also commodities. In as much as manufactured and agricultural consumer goods are commodities, the urban population also acquires them through purchase and sale. In this case, there's a transfer of commodities from state and cooperative ownership. In socialist economy, commodity production is a commodity production of a special kind, without private ownership of the means of production and without capitalists. In the main, it is carried on by united socialist producers, the state, collective farms, and the cooperatives. The means of production are socially owned, and the system of hired labor and the exploitation of man by man is abolished. These decisive economic conditions confine commodity production in socialist economy within definite limits. It cannot turn into capitalist production, and instead serves socialist society. To deny this is to show a lack of a materialistic understanding of socialist economy, economic laws, and economic phenomena. In socialist society, commodity production is not as unlimited and universal in its scope as it is under capitalism. The area of operation of commodity production and circulation is limited mainly to consumer goods. Labor power is not a commodity. The land and natural resources are state property. It cannot be bought or sold. State enterprises also cannot be bought and sold, and may be transferred from one state organization to another only by special permission. This includes works and factories and mines, arid power stations and their fixed productive stocks, machinery, building installation, etc. They are therefore not commodities, not objects of sale or purchase. Means of production produced in the state sector, such as machines, machine tools, metal, coal, oil, etc., are chiefly distributed among state enterprises. The national economic plans provide for the allocation to each enterprise of definite material funds appropriate to its production program. The enterprises producing these funds supply them to the consuming enterprises on the basis of contracts between the two parties. When means of production are transferred to a particular enterprise, the socialist state remains their full owner. Directors of enterprises who receive means of production from the socialist state in no way become their owners. They are simply agents of the state invested with the function of utilizing the means of production in accordance with the state plans. The main agricultural machines, such as tractors and combine harvesters, are not sold to the collective farms, but are concentrated in the machine and tractor stations, which are state enterprises and serve the collective farms with the assistance of these means of production. The means of production bought by the industrial cooperative collective farms and collective farmers are motor vehicles, equipment for social farming of the collective farm, cement, iron bricks, timber for building, the simplest agricultural machines and tools, and these are all commodities. The means of production sold to foreign states, foreign countries, are also commodities. In these cases, purchase and sale, and exchange in the ownership of the commodities, takes place. Thus, the means of production manufactured by state enterprises and distributed within the state sector are essentially not commodities. This video has been going on long enough as is, so I'm just going to conclude by saying, of course, commodity production remained under socialism. How else are you going to maintain the connection between the state sector and collective farms? Via forceful appropriation? What about global trade? The rest of the world may still be capitalist, and the socialist state can't just exist in a bubble cut off from the rest of the world. In that case, of course, there will be commodity production for the sake of foreign trade. People who claim the USSR was not socialist due to commodity production, for example, these people are talking in absolute terms, and they will never do anything constructive towards revolution in this case, because if they ever did have any responsibility in a revolutionary situation, they would ruin it with their horrible theoretical understandings and application. Sometimes you have to be pragmatic, avoid book worship, and not twist what Marx is saying to suit your own personal biases. To conclude completely, I'm just gonna pose a few questions. Was there a reserve army of labor in the USSR? No, there was not. Was there the right to hire and fire? No, there was not. Was there wage labor? No, there was not. If you think there was, you need to prove that. Was there exploitation? No, there wasn't. Was the law of value the regulator of production? It did exist, but was it the regulator of production like under capitalism? No, the National Economic Plan was the regulator of production under socialism and in the USSR. To deny the fact that commodity production takes on a different form under socialist conditions than capitalist conditions is to show that you lack a materialistic understanding of economic situations, economic laws, and economic phenomena. Was there any private property? No. Was there a market? No, outside of collective farm markets, which were incredibly tiny and restricted. I mean, on the larger scale, was there a market in the Soviet Union? No. Were there boom and bust cycles that are inherent to capitalism? No. Were there capitalists? No. The state was the only capitalist isn't an argument. Socialism isn't some on-off switch, nor is it based on your personal feelings towards a state. The nature of a socialist state can be critically examined in order to reach an unbiased conclusion. Sadly, many have not reflected and analyzed these facts, instead choosing to appeal to abstract utopian notions of what they feel socialism to be.